welcome back to the Injarmi channel. In the last two videos, we shared the unboxing experience and an actual real-world usage review of the Pixel 5. If the last video, which focused on actual use features, was for people who are already familiar with the idea of the Google Pixel series and know what to expect, this video will be for people who are in the other ecosystems, primarily Apple, who are considering moving over to the Pixel series and the Google ecosystem. The main focus of this video will be on how the two companies of Google and Apple drive their business and how that will affect our actual experience with their products. First, to improve our understanding of the Google Pixel series, let's take a look into the corporation that is Google and how it drives its business. Google is an advertisement firm at its heart. To clarify the scale of the amount of data that Google processes on a daily basis, in 2019, Google performed an average of 3.5 billion searches per day. Millions of users around the world give their information of what issues, products, or services they are interested while logged into their accounts by the second. Google becomes able to accumulate unthinkable amounts of data that can be valuable to potential advertisers. To provide one more example of the many ways Google gathers intimate information about ourselves, there is a timeline feature in Google Maps. If you agree to allow Google Maps to take your GPS location data, you can see your entire history of where you were, how you traveled, which shops you visited, etc. The image you see is an example of a day from more than a year ago, but you can see exactly where I went, the names of the shops I visited, and since my Google Photos is linked to the same account as Google Maps, which photos I took in each place. Timeline is just one example of the tremendous amounts of data that Google collects from Google's suite of apps that assist different aspects of our lives, such as Photos, Gmail, or Calendar. Google not only takes information from our search history, but more aspects of our lives than you can imagine. From the data collected and from the many algorithms that Google operates to figure out the likely desirable products and services to each user, Google provides the most relevant advertisements to us. The data processing ability of Google to connect the correct advertisers to potential consumers is also industry-leading. According to the 2019 data from Statista, the overall advertisement revenue of Google for the year was $134 billion. This is 83% of the total revenue of Alphabet, the parent company of Google, which totals in $161 billion. Considering the reason why Google is trying to gather our active information, from the consumer's point of view, Google has a huge strength in terms of the ability to provide not only the information for the desirable goods or services to purchase, but also the appropriate information that we require. Of course, for those who actively implement Google's technologies in their everyday lives, after understanding how much Google knows about my intimate details, the big brother from George Orwell's 1984 may come into mind. But at least until this point in time, Google has clearly presented the choice to the customers what information each individual would like to provide, if at all. Taking a step further, Google runs a service called Google Takeout, which lets you download all the information that Google has gathered about you. And in Google's list of principles, it is included that although Google will use your information to maximize their advertisement profits, they will never sell or profit directly from the private information of their members. Although this may not relieve us of all our concerns, this does make a pretty good argument that Google is at least transparent with what information they take from us and what measures it takes to protect it. Since the core revenue of Google comes from advertisement, the most valuable asset that Google has is the information it has gathered from its users and the processing capabilities of that data. Let's go back to the revenue chart of Google. The share of the Pixel is included in the Other segment, along with all of Google's hardware suite including the Pixel Books, Google Home, and Google Nest. Google's revenue from all of its hardware sums up to $17 billion, which barely makes up for 10% of the whole revenue pie of Alphabet. If we look at the pure numbers of the sales of the Google Pixel, according to the International Data Corporation, in 2019, a total of 7.2 million Pixel phones were sold, with no distinguishment between different models in the Pixel lineup. If you consider the fact that just a single Samsung Galaxy S20 model, only in the first quarter of 2020, has sold 8.2 million units, the number for the total Pixel units sold is very, very small. Some might argue that it's because the Pixel lineup just cannot keep up with the two giants of Apple and Samsung. But do we really think that Google is a company that is less capable in terms of engineering or marketing? If we take a look at what other reviewers are saying, of course, although we cannot know exactly what Google is thinking unless you're an executive in Google, But it does seem that Google's primary goal with the Pixel series may not be dominating the market with a superior phone and making money directly from the sales. It is generally agreed that the point of the Pixel series is to demonstrate the technical capabilities of Google, market the Google brand, and use it as a testbed for the updates of the Android OS. There is a consensus that the Pixel series was introduced to serve as a testbed market for Google. If that's the case, the strengths and weaknesses of the Pixel series from the consumer standpoint is clear. We get both the best and the worst of Google. We will be provided with the fastest, the most optimized updates and services from Google's algorithms, and we will serve to Google the most amount of personal information. If you trust that Google will not abuse the information that it gains from us, this will be the best phone for you. If you don't, this will be the worst. Now let's take a look at the business model of Apple. According to the 2018 data from Reuters, the total revenue of the Apple Corporation summed up to $202 billion. Among that, $129 billion, a whopping 64% of the revenue was from the iPhone series alone. Extending to hardware sales, 80% of Apple's revenue comes from iPhones, iPads, Macs, Apple Watches, and etc. combined. Google does have the luxury to be somewhat indifferent to the sales figures of the Pixel series, but if the iPhone series fall, it will be catastrophic to Apple. Because of that, Apple ensures that the iPhone is always the finest in its generation and in a caliber that can lead the industry. I personally am not very fond of Apple, but I cannot possibly make an argument that the iPhone is in any way substandard to its competition. In my personal opinion, in terms of the design, build quality, and level of finish, the iPhone series is at another level with the contemporary competition. And in terms of software, the proprietary SoC architecture of the Apple Silicon and the various hardware, down to the software of many killer apps, OCD-level optimization has been carried out for the best possible user experience before the products are rolled out. For a slightly more detailed explanation for the nerds out there, the thread for the UI rendering is set at a higher priority, so unless you're running an application that actually requires a lot of horsepower, it is likely that the Apple system will be more responsive and smooth. Due to the nature of the Android, where the designer doesn't know which SoC will meet which hardware, and a lot of the apps are open sourced and relatively barrier-free to smaller scale creators, compatibility becomes a major issue. Apple is a company that can afford to optimize its systems at the assembly language level, which Android systems are not capable of. This puts Apple at an edge over other systems, always providing a more smooth and responsive experience to the users. On the other hand, because the sales volume of the iPhone is so large, small cuts around the corner scale up to huge profits. Competitors such as Samsung, OnePlus, HTC, or Asus participate in fierce competition in terms of the latest hardware, whereas the iPhone often comes up short in that area. For example, in the case of compatibility with the 5G network, Samsung's first phone with 5G compatibility was the Galaxy S10 released in February of 2019. The first phone of OnePlus was the OnePlus 7 Pro released in May of the same year. The first Apple product, however, was the iPhone 12 series released in October of 2020. Apple was more than a year late from its competitors with a technology of which the infrastructure was already setting in. Apple doesn't only avoid risk in adopting new technologies, but also refrains from applying the best version of existing technologies. If we compare the RAM capacity of the flagship phones of 2020, the Samsung Galaxy S20 Ultra has 16GB, the OnePlus 8T has 12GB, but the iPhone 12 Pro Max has only 6GB. Comparing the battery capacity of these phones, the Galaxy S20 has 5000 mAh, OnePlus 8T has 4.5K mAh, but the iPhone 12 Pro Max has only 3687 mAh. While Apple accelerates the UI to enhance the real-world experience of the users, in objective performance of the hardware, Apple products generally are inferior to its competition. Apple fills this gap with various marketing methods. In the electronics world, Apple's marketing has always been groundbreaking. They have broken free from the paradigm of electronic products focusing on their sheet specs and started appealing more intuitively how their products can enter and enhance your everyday life. To look into more cunning methods, Apple directly pays off retailers to stop them from dropping the prices of their products below a certain acceptable level to Apple. To boost their premium image, they have commissioned Norman Foster, a world-renowned architect, to design the Apple Store. Apple has also changed the idea of packaging. They started to sell their products with their batteries fully charged for the customer to immediately enjoy the products after their purchase, and raised the overall quality of the packaging to enhance the purchasing experience when buying Apple products. These combined created what is called the Apple experience. For those who have experience of purchasing Apple products, I think we can all generally agree that there is a certain premium feel that is hard to describe in the process of purchasing and using Apple products. Apple has adopted 1,000 more methods to keep their products perceived by the public as premium objects. Thanks to such efforts, Apple consistently enjoys high volumes of sales and the premium placement in the market despite its arguably lacking performance. If the fact is understood that more of the price we pay for the iPhone is for the marketing schemes than the actual performance and features we can enjoy, more so than other products, I wonder if choosing Apple will still be the reasonable choice as the consumer. American social psychologists French and Raven categorized the 6 bases or forms of power in 1959. They are legitimate power, reward power, expert power, coercive power, referent power, and informational power. The other 5 we can feel the pressure of in our everyday lives. But perhaps in the case of referent power, the influential power beauty has over us may not be immediately intuitively understandable. But if we look back in history, the biggest changes have always come from the aspirations and efforts of the people of the time to create a more beautiful world. In each of our lives, we are affected from many causes and events and make countless decisions. But amongst those causes, perhaps the aspiration for beauty, according to our aesthetic view into the world, may be one of the deepest, most visceral one overseeing our actions. In the Korean theater scene, there is a slang term called pare. The etymology comes from the Japanese word pareru, which means to get caught. The slang term refers to the situation when during the act, the concentration of the audience being broken due to some kind of failure in presentation. When Hamlet stabs Polonius, no one will actually think the actor playing Hamlet is actually killing the actor playing Polonius. However, if it's really obvious that the sword didn't touch Polonius, or if the acting is terribly unconvincing, the audience will have meta thoughts, such as the performance of actors or limitations of directing. From the director's point of view, whose goal was to trap the audience in the tragic world of the play of Hamlet and touch the emotions of the audience and their aesthetic view of the world, it's a disaster. People tend to get defensive when they sense something is trying to control within their unconsciousness. Apple's products are beautiful, but from Apple's efforts to keep their products premium, arguably there is some pare. Of course, in such a worldwide product, it is very rare to have little or no marketing. However, the amount and elaborateness of Apple's marketing is almost unprecedented. From this barrage of marketing, I, for one, have turned defensive and was disappointed from Apple's slow adoption of new technologies and cutting corners with existing specifications. I personally am not a fan of Apple. But admittedly, more weaknesses of Apple were highlighted in this video than their strengths. To make a fair argument for Apple, disregarding compatibility concerns, they do have the most advanced ARM SoC amongst the current competition, which is the core element for the processing ability. Especially when we talk about the recently released MacBook series and Mac Mini with the M1 chip, it was such an attractive product that even I, who's pretty much as anti-Apple as they get, was tempted to the verge of buying. Let's talk about that in another video in the future. Thank you very much for watching. Please like and subscribe to help us in continuing our story. For those of you who have already subscribed, we would like to tell you that it really does help. Thank you.